Zekthara adjusted his battle armor as the transport ship descended toward the small human colony. Through the viewport, he could see the mining facilities scattered across the rocky planet's surface. The intelligence report said there were only 2,000 humans down there, mostly miners and their families. No military base, no weapons. Just soft creatures digging rocks from the ground. "This will be easy," his squad leader Vexton had said. "Humans are weak. They surrender fast when they see our ships." Zekthara had fought in many battles across the galaxy. He had seen proud warrior races kneel before the might of the Veltani Empire. These humans would be no different. The plan was simple: land, demand surrender, take control. 2 hours at most. The transport touched down near the main colony building. Zekthara stepped out with his squad, weapons ready. The human settlement looked peaceful. Small buildings, mining equipment, children playing in the streets. He could smell something cooking from the nearby homes. It reminded him of his own village back on Velton. A human male approached them. He was tall with gray hair and calm eyes. He wore simple work clothes, not a uniform. This had to be Jake Morrison, the colony administrator. "Welcome to Kepler 442b, the human said. His voice was steady, showing no fear. "I'm Jake Morrison. What can we do for you?" Zekthara as translator converted the words instantly. He raised his plasma rifle. "I am Commander Zekthara of the Veltani Imperial Fleet. This world now belongs to the Empire. You will surrender immediately or face destruction." Jake Morrison nodded slowly. "I see. Can you give us 1 hour to gather our people?" "There are families here, children. We need time to prepare." This was going well. The human was being reasonable. Zekthara had expected screaming, panic, maybe some foolish attempt to fight. Instead, this Jake Morrison seemed almost relieved. "You have 1 hour," Zekthara agreed. "Any attempt to resist will result in death." Jake Morrison smiled. It was a strange smile, like he knew something Zekthara didn't. Understood. 1 hour. The human walked away, talking into a small device. Zekthara watched him go, then turned to his squad, set up a perimeter. "This is almost over." But as the minutes passed, something felt wrong. The colony was too quiet. The humans had gathered in the central square as ordered, but they weren't acting like prisoners. They were talking quietly, some even laughing. The children seemed excited, not scared. A young human female approached the perimeter. She had short, brown hair and wore a mining engineer's uniform. Her name badge read Lisa Brooks, Commander Zekthara. She called out, "Mr. Morrison asked me to check if you need anything. Water? Food?" Zekthara studied her through his helmet sensors. No weapons, no armor. Just a small human offering hospitality to an invading army. These creatures were either very brave or very stupid. "We need nothing from you," he replied. Lisa Brooks nodded. "Well, if you change your mind, just let us know. We're pretty good at taking care of visitors." Again that strange smile. Zekthara was beginning to feel uneasy. The hour passed. Jake Morrison returned with several other humans. They looked calm, almost cheerful. "We're ready," Morrison announced. "But before we officially surrender, would you like a tour of our facilities? We're proud of what we've built here. It might help you understand what you're taking control of." Zekthara hesitated. Standard procedure was to secure the population. First, then inventory the assets. But these humans were being so cooperative, a quick tour wouldn't hurt. "Very well. But my soldiers stay with your people." "Of course," Morrison agreed. They walked toward the mining complex. Morrison pointed out various buildings and equipment. "That's our primary excavation laser. It can cut through solid rock like butter. Over there is our ore processing plant, and that's our fusion reactor. Powers the whole colony." Zekthara nodded, making mental notes. The humans had impressive technology, but nothing that seemed militarily useful. They were examining a large mining vehicle when the first explosion happened. The sound was deafening. Zekthara spun around to see one of his transport ships erupting in flames. His communication system crackled with panicked voices. Transport 3 is down. Repeat, Transport 3 is down. What's happening? He demanded into his cum. Unknown. Weapons fire. The colonists are attacking. Zekthara turned to Morrison, raising his weapon, but the human was gone. Vanished like smoke. Around him, the peaceful colony was transforming into a war zone. The mining laser Morrison had shown him was no longer cutting rocks. It was slicing through the hull of Transport 2, the massive beam turning metal into vapor. The ore processing plant was launching chunks of processed metal like artillery shells. Even the children's playground had become a weapon, with slides and swings firing explosive projectiles. Impossible! Zekthara shouted. These are civilians! A young human appeared from behind a building. He looked barely old enough to fight, with messy hair and oil-stained clothes. This had to be Tom Hughes, one of the mechanics, but he wasn't running in fear. He was carrying something that looked like a mining tool, but modified with extra parts. Hey. Alien, Tom called out. Want to see what we do to unwelcome guests? He pulled a trigger. The device shot out a net made of mining cables, electrified with power from the colony's fusion reactor. The net wrapped around two of Zekthara's soldiers, and they screamed as electricity coursed through their bodies. Zekthara fired at the boy, but Tom was already gone, melted into the maze of buildings and equipment that he knew better than any alien invader ever could. All units, fall back to the landing zone, Zekthara ordered. But as his soldiers tried to retreat, they found their path blocked by mining equipment that had been turned into mobile fortresses. Excavators with armor welded to their sides rolled toward them, their digging arms replaced with weapons that shot superheated metal. Lisa Brooks appeared on top of one of the excavators, no longer the polite engineer who had offered them water. She was wearing makeshift armor and carrying a rifle that looked like it had been built from mining equipment. You wanted to see our facilities, she shouted over the sound of battle. This is what we do here. We dig, we build, and we protect what's ours. The excavator's arm swung toward Zekthara. He dodged, but the weapon grazed his armor, leaving a smoking gash. These humans had turned their entire colony into a weapon dot as the battle raged. Zekthara began to understand the horrible truth. These weren't just miners. They were something far worse. They were humans who had learned to survive on a hostile world by turning everything around them into tools of war. The peaceful colony had been a trap, and he had walked right into it. The war was just beginning. And already Zekthara knew that everything he had learned about warfare was wrong. These humans didn't fight like any species he had ever encountered. They fought like the planet itself had come alive and decided to kill them all. 3 months had passed since the disaster at Kepler 442b. Zekthara still woke up screaming sometimes, remembering the sound of mining lasers cutting through his ship's hull. Half his squad was dead. The other half wished they were, but the war continued. The Veltani Empire could not let the humans think they had won. If word spread that a mining colony had defeated an imperial fleet, other species might rebel. The humans had to be crushed, quickly and completely. Now Zekthara found himself in the asteroid belt of the Vega system, hunting down human survivors. After the colony battle, scattered escape pods had fled into the maze of floating rocks. Intelligence said there were maybe 50 humans hiding among the asteroids, wounded and running low on supplies. This time will be different, Commander Vexton had promised. No surprises, no tricks, just scared humans with nowhere to run. Zekthara hoped. His commander was right. His new squad was nervous. They had all heard the stories from Kepler 442b, stories about humans, who turned mining equipment into weapons of war. Stories about children who built bombs from playground toys. The asteroid field stretched out before them like a graveyard of broken rocks. Some asteroids were as small as fighters, others as large as space stations. Perfect places to hide, but also perfect places to get trapped. Spread out, Zekthara ordered. Check every asteroid. Remember, these are wounded survivors. They should surrender easily. His squad moved into the field, scanning each rock with their sensors. The asteroids were mostly iron and nickel, which made scanning difficult, but they were patient. They would find the humans eventually. The first sign of trouble came 2 hours later. Squad leader Kekstar was investigating a medium-sized asteroid when his fighter simply vanished. One moment he was there, the next moment there was only empty space and floating debris. Kekstar report, Zekthara called out. Silence. All units converge on Kekstar's last position. When they arrived, they found pieces of his fighter scattered across 3 asteroids. But there was no sign of what had destroyed it. No energy signatures, no weapon traces. It was as if the asteroid itself had reached out and crushed the ship. Impossible, muttered pilot Dexrin. There's nothing here but rocks. That's when they saw it. A small human fighter, badly damaged, drifting between 2 asteroids. Its hull was scorched and cracked. One wing was completely gone. It should have been a helpless wreck, but as they watched, the fighter suddenly came alive. Its remaining engines fired, and it dove toward the nearest Veltani ship. The pilot was Nick Carter, according to their intelligence files. A simple transport pilot who should have been more worried about getting home to his family than fighting aliens. He's damaged, Dexrin laughed. This will be easy. But Nick Carter's fighter wasn't trying to escape, it was attacking. The human had somehow rigged his ship's life support system to explode outward, creating a cloud of superheated gas. When Dexrin flew into the cloud, his fighter's engines stalled, and he went spinning into an asteroid. How did he do that? Zekthara wondered aloud. Nick Carter's voice crackled over the radio. His translator made the words sound calm, almost friendly. Welcome to our neighborhood. Hope you like the decorations. Only then did Zekthara realize what had happened to Kekstar. The asteroids weren't empty hiding places. The humans had been modifying them, turning them into weapons. They had welded pieces of their escape pods to the rocks, creating hidden missile launchers and energy weapons. The entire asteroid field had become a trap. All units, retreat to safe distance, Zekthara ordered, but the humans weren't done. Another voice came over the radio, this one female and tired. This is Amy Wells. I'm a medic, in case anyone's keeping track. Just thought you should know, we've got about 30 wounded people in here. They're hurt, they're scared, and they're very, very angry. Amy Wells was in an asteroid hospital, according to their files. She should have been treating patients. Not fighting wars, but her voice sounded different now, harder. We've been here for 3 months, she continued. Do you know what humans do when they're trapped somewhere for 3 months? We make ourselves at home, we build things, we plan things, we get creative. More fighters emerged from the asteroids. Not human military ships, but civilian craft that had been modified beyond recognition. Mining vessels with military weapons welded to their hulls. Medical transports carrying explosive payloads. Even a food delivery ship that had been turned into a missile. The humans were attacking with everything they had, but that wasn't the scary part. The scary part was how organized they were. Every attack was coordinated, every movement planned. They weren't desperate survivors fighting for their lives. They were hunters who had been waiting for their prey to arrive. They've been planning this, Zekthara realized. All of this, they wanted us to come here. Steve Logan's voice joined the radio chatter. He was an engineer who had been working on mining equipment before the war. Now he sounded like a military commander. Engineering report, we've got 17 functional weapon platforms, enough ammunition for about 6 hours of fighting, and a really bad attitude about uninvited guests. The human attacks weren't random. They were forcing the Veltani ships into specific positions, hurting them like prey animals. Zekthara watched in horror as his squad was slowly pushed toward the center of the asteroid field, where the biggest rocks waited. Sir, his navigator called out, we're being surrounded. It was true. The humans had been moving through the asteroid field like ghosts, using the rocks as cover. Now they had Zekthara's remaining ships trapped in a circle of floating death. Nick Carter's fighter appeared again, still limping but still fighting. Half his ship was gone, but the human pilot sounded almost cheerful. Hey, alien commander. You want to know something interesting about humans? We don't like to lose. And we really don't like people who attack mining colonies. You're outnumbered, Zekdara shouted back. Surrender now and we'll show mercy. The human's laughter was cold and bitter. Mercy? You attacked families, you killed children. You turned our home into a battlefield. There's no mercy here. More voices joined the radio. Amy Wells, medical report. We've got enough wounded to fill a hospital ship, but every single one of them can still pull a trigger. Steve Logan, engineering report. We've turned this entire asteroid field into one big weapon. Every rock, every piece of debris, every floating chunk of metal is part of our plan. Nick Carter, pilot report. We're not trying to escape anymore. We're trying to make sure you never threaten another human colony again. The attacks intensified. The humans were using the asteroids themselves as weapons, somehow moving the massive rocks into collision courses with Veltani ships. They had turned the entire field into a massive gravity trap, using the natural forces of space to crush their enemies. Zekthara watched another of his ships disappear, crushed between two asteroids that the humans had somehow guided into position. His squad was being picked apart piece by piece, and there was nothing he could do about it. They're not running, he whispered to himself. They're not trying to escape. They're hunting us. That's when he understood the true horror of what was happening. These humans weren't desperate survivors. They were persistent hunters, the kind of predators who followed their prey for days, weeks, months until it collapsed from exhaustion. They had been waiting in this asteroid field for 3 months, turning it into a death trap, planning their revenge. The humans would never stop. They would never give up. They would follow their enemies to the ends of the galaxy if necessary, and they would never, ever forgive. As his ship's hull began to crack under the pressure of coordinated human attacks, Zekthara realized that the war was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. And the humans had already won the most important battle. They had learned to be patient. The last thing he heard before his ship's communication system failed was Nick Carter's voice, calm and determined. See you in hell, alien. We'll be waiting. The war had been going on for 2 years now, and Zekthara had learned to fear the sound of human voices. He had survived the mining colony massacre and the asteroid field trap, but each battle left him more confused and terrified. The humans fought like no species he had ever seen. Now he stood on the command bridge of the dreadnought Void Crusher, watching New Terra grow larger on the viewscreen. This was humanity's second largest colony world, home to 15 million people. The Veltani Empire had brought everything they had, 500 ships, 2 million soldiers, enough firepower to crack a planet. This time we do it right, Admiral Kolvex announced to the fleet. No more tricks, no more surprises. We burn everything from orbit, then land troops to finish what's left. Zekthara nodded, but his stomach felt cold. He had heard similar words before, just before watching his comrades die in ways that would haunt him forever. The humans always had surprises. The bombardment began at dawn. Massive energy beams lanced down from the fleet, turning human cities into lakes of molten glass. The planetary defense stations died quickly, their shields no match for the concentrated firepower of the Imperial fleet. Within hours, most of New Terra's surface was burning. Resistance is minimal, reported the tactical officer. Ready for ground assault. Zekthara suited up with his new squad. Most of them were veterans now, survivors of other battles with humans. They all had the same look in their eyes, the careful wariness of predators who had learned that their prey could bite back. The landing shuttles descended through smoke and ash. The human cities were ruins, their buildings collapsed into rubble. Surely nothing could have survived the orbital bombardment. Surely this time the humans would surrender. They landed near what had been the city of New Dallas. The streets were empty, filled with debris and the smell of burning metal. No bodies, though. That was strange. There should have been bodies. Where is everyone? Asked Trooper Nexville, his weapon ready. Dead, said Squad Leader Gexmore. Vaporized by the bombardment. This is what happens when humans try to fight the Empire. But Zekthara wasn't convinced. He had learned to trust his instincts when it came to humans. Something felt wrong. The city was too quiet, too empty. It felt like a trap. They moved through the ruins, checking building after building. Their sensors detected no life signs, no movement, just empty shells of concrete and twisted metal. Maybe the humans really were all dead this time. That's when they heard the singing. It was a human voice, coming from somewhere in the rubble ahead. A single voice, singing something that sounded like a children's song. The translator struggled with the words, but the tune was clear and bright, completely out of place in the devastated city. "Contact ahead," Dexmore whispered. "Single human appears to be wounded." They advanced carefully, following the sound. Around a corner, they found a human male sitting against a collapsed wall. He was wearing the uniform of a colonial marine, but it was torn and bloody. His left arm was missing, and his face was covered in burns. This was Ryan Torres, according to their intelligence files. A sergeant in the Colonial Defense Force. He should have been dead, or at least unconscious from his injuries. Instead, he was singing and smiling. "Hello there," Ryan said when he saw them. His voice was weak but cheerful. "Nice day for a walk, isn't it?" Dexmore raised his weapon. "Surrender, human. You are our prisoner." Ryan Torres laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Prisoner? Oh, I don't think so. See, we got word that you were coming. We had time to prepare." "Prepare for what?" Zekthara demanded. "Your city is destroyed? Your people are dead? What could you possibly have prepared?" Ryan's smile grew wider. "We prepared to die properly, human style." That's when Zekthara noticed the device in Ryan's remaining hand. It looked like a detonator, but modified with extra wires and components. The human marine was holding it gently, like a precious gift. "You see," Ryan continued, "we figured out something about your species. You're used to fighting civilized wars. Rules and honor and all that. You expect surrender when the situation becomes hopeless?" He pressed a button on the device. Nothing happened, but somewhere in the distance, Zekthara heard a sound like thunder. "But humans don't fight civilized wars," Ryan said. "When we're losing, we don't surrender, we go berserker." More sounds of thunder, getting closer. The ground began to shake under their feet. "What is that?" Dexmore shouted. Ryan Torres was still smiling. "That's the sound of 15 million people who decided they'd rather die fighting than live as slaves. We call it the Berserker Protocol." The first explosion came from their left. A building that had looked empty suddenly erupted in flames, and human figures emerged from the rubble. But these weren't normal humans. They were covered in burns and wounds, moving with the jerky movements of people who should have been dead hours ago. One of them was Kate Adams, a scientist who had been working on medical research before the war. Now she was carrying containers of something that smoked and hissed. Her hair was gone, burned away by the orbital bombardment, but her eyes were bright with a terrible purpose. "Chemical warfare," she called out to Ryan. "Homemade, but effective. I use the supplies from my lab." She threw the containers at Zekthara's squad. The contents splashed across their armor and immediately began eating through the metal. Acid made from medical supplies and laboratory chemicals. More humans appeared. Alex Murphy, a civilian who had been an accountant before the war. Now he was carrying explosives strapped to his chest, walking toward the alien soldiers with the steady pace of someone who had already accepted death. "This is for my children," he said calmly. "They were in the school when your bombardment hit." The explosion knocked Zekthara off his feet. When he looked up, Alex Murphy was gone along with two of his squad members. The human had turned himself into a weapon. "Impossible," Dexmore whispered. "They're civilians. They should be running, hiding, surrendering." Ryan Torres was still sitting against the wall, still smiling. "You don't understand humans at all. Do you? When we're pushed to the edge, we don't become victims, we become weapons." More explosions rocked the city. The human survivors were emerging from everywhere, from sewers, from collapsed buildings, from bomb craters. They were wounded, burned, dying, but they kept fighting. Children who couldn't have been more than 10 years old were throwing homemade Grenades, elderly people were charging alien soldiers with kitchen knives. Medical report? Kate Adams called out, her voice carrying over the sounds of battle. We've got about 3 hours before the radiation poisoning kills us all. Might as well make them count. Confirmed, Ryan Torres replied. All units, remember the protocol. No prisoners, no surrender, no mercy. We fight until we die, then we fight some more. Zekthara watched in horror as a human female, burned beyond recognition, tackled one of his troopers and detonated a bomb hidden in her clothing. She was already dying from radiation poisoning, but she had used her last moments to kill an enemy. Fall back, Gexmore ordered. All units fall back to the landing zone. But the humans were everywhere now. They had turned the entire city into a death trap, using the rubble from the bombardment as cover. They fought with weapons made from debris, with chemicals stolen from destroyed laboratories, with explosives crafted from household items. The worst part was their faces. They weren't angry or afraid. They were calm, almost peaceful. They had accepted that they were going to die, and that acceptance had made them terrifyingly dangerous. They're not trying to win, Zekthara realized. They're trying to make us pay the highest price possible for victory. Ryan Torres heard him. Now you're getting it. We can't save New Terra, but we can make sure that every alien who sets foot on this world pays for it with blood. We can make sure that the next time your empire thinks about attacking humans, they remember what happened here. The Marine pulled out another device, this one larger than the first. This is connected to the planetary fusion reactor. We've been saving it for a special occasion. Zekthara's blood went cold. You're going to destroy the entire planet? And just the continent? Ryan replied. Along with about half your invasion fleet. We figured it was a fair trade. The human was dying, his body failing from radiation and blood loss. But his eyes were still bright, still determined. You want to know the real secret about humans? We're not afraid of dying. We're afraid of living without honor, and there's no honor in surrender. As the evacuation alarm sounded across the fleet, Zekthara ran for the landing shuttles. Behind him, the city of New Dallas erupted in a pillar of fire that reached into space. 15 million humans had chosen to die rather than surrender, and they had taken half the Imperial invasion force with them on the shuttle back to the fleet. Zekthara sat in stunned silence. They had won the battle, but it felt like a defeat. The humans had shown them something that no other species had ever demonstrated, the willingness to destroy themselves rather than submit. The war was far from over, and now Zekthara knew that every human world would be another New Terra, another Berserker protocol, another demonstration that humans would rather die as warriors than live as slaves. He began to wonder if the Veltani Empire had made a terrible mistake in choosing humans as their enemy. 6 months after the New Terra incident, Zekthara found himself standing outside a human research facility on the planet, Tau Ceti Prime. The building looked ordinary from the outside, white walls, glass windows, perfectly normal for a scientific research station. But Zekthara had learned never to trust appearances when it came to humans. The facility had been abandoned when the Veltani forces arrived. No fighting, no resistance, just empty laboratories and offices. Too easy, Zekthara thought. With humans, it was always too easy until it wasn't. Secure the building, ordered Colonel Texmar. Intelligence says this was their primary weapons research center. We need to see what the humans were developing. Zekthara's squad moved through the entrance carefully. The lobby was clean and bright, with pictures on the walls showing human scientists at work. Normal people doing normal research. Nothing that looked dangerous or threatening, but something felt wrong. The air had a strange smell, like chemicals and burned metal, and the silence was too complete. Even abandoned buildings usually had some sound, wind through broken windows, small animals, something. This place was dead quiet. They found the first laboratory on the second floor, Dr. Ben Parker's office, according to the nameplate on the door. Inside, they discovered research notes scattered across the desk, equations written on whiteboards, and several strange devices sitting on laboratory tables. What is this? asked Trooper Vexelin, pointing at one of the devices. Zekthara studied it through his scanner. The device looked like a simple metal box with buttons and lights. His scanner said it was made of ordinary materials: steel, copper, basic electronics. Nothing dangerous. Probably some kind of measuring tool, he decided. Humans use lots of tools for their research. They moved to the next room. This one belonged to Dr. Maria Santos, according to the door sign. It looked like a biology laboratory, with microscopes and containers filled with liquid. Everything seemed normal until Trooper Dexavar noticed something moving in one of the containers. "Sir," he called out, "I think there's something alive in here." Zekthara looked closer. Inside the container was a small plant, green and harmless looking. But as he watched, the plant seemed to turn toward him, as if it could sense his presence. "It's just a plant," Vexelin said. "Humans grow plants for food and decoration." "Maybe," Zekthara replied, but he made a note to have the science team examine it later. The third laboratory was the largest. It belonged to Chris Johnson, a human computer specialist. The room was filled with machines that hummed quietly, their screens showing streams of numbers and symbols. At the center of the room sat a larger computer with a dark screen. "Power it up," Colonel Texmar ordered. "Let's see what the humans were computing." Dexavar found the power switch and turned on the main computer. The screen flickered to life, showing a simple message: "Welcome, Veltani visitors. Please proceed to Laboratory 4 for your demonstration." Demonstration? Zekthara felt that familiar cold feeling in his stomach. What kind of demonstration? They found Laboratory 4 in the basement. The door was already open and bright. Lights were on inside. As they entered, they saw a human male sitting calmly at a desk. He was middle-aged with gray hair and a friendly smile. This had to be Dr. Ben Parker. "Welcome," Dr. Parker said cheerfully. "I've been waiting for you. Please, come in and make yourselves comfortable." Colonel Texmar raised his weapon. "You're our prisoner, human." "Why didn't you evacuate with the others?" Dr. Parker laughed. "Oh, I volunteered to stay behind. Someone had to give you the tour of our research. You're going to find it very educational." "What research?" Zekthara demanded. "We've seen your laboratories, nothing but simple tools and harmless plants." "Harmless?" Dr. Parker's smile grew wider. "Oh, my dear alien friend, you haven't been paying attention. Let me show you what human weapons research really looks like." He picked up the device from his first laboratory, the simple metal box that Zekthara's scanner had identified as harmless. "This little thing, it's a gravity manipulator. Very small scale, but effective. Watch." Dr. Parker pressed a button. Suddenly, Colonel Texmar was lifted off the ground, floating helplessly in midair. The device was creating a localized gravity field, turning the laws of physics into a weapon. "Impossible," Texmar gasped. "Gravity manipulation requires massive equipment, enormous power sources." "That's what we used to think," Dr. Parker replied. "Then we figured out how to do it with a device the size of a lunchbox. Human engineering at its finest." He set the colonel down gently. "But that's just the beginning. Maria, would you like to show them your work?" Dr. Maria Santos emerged from the shadows. She was carrying the container with the plant they had seen earlier. "Biological warfare," she announced proudly. "This little plant has been modified to eat metal, specifically the alloys used in Veltani. Ship hulls." She opened the container and placed the plant on Vexelin's armor. Immediately, the plant's roots began to spread across the metal surface, and wherever they touched, the armor began to dissolve. "It's hungry," Maria explained as Vexelin frantically tried to pull the plant off his armor. "And it reproduces very quickly. One plant becomes 1,000 plants in about 6 hours. Perfect for eating entire starships from the inside out." Vexelin finally managed to remove the plant, but his armor now had holes eaten completely through. This violates every Galactic war convention," he protested. "Does it?" Dr. Parker asked innocently. "I don't remember humans signing any Galactic war conventions. We're new to this whole interstellar warfare thing, so we're making up our own rules." Chris Johnson appeared next, carrying a small device that looked like a communication tablet. "Computer Science Division reporting," he said with mock formality. "I'd like to introduce you to our latest artificial intelligence." The tablet's screen lit up, showing a simple smiley face. "Hello, Veltani soldiers," it said in a cheerful voice. "I am Control Protocol 7. I have been designed to infiltrate and take control of enemy ship systems. A computer virus?" Zekthara asked. "Much more than that," Chris replied. "CP7 can learn and adapt. It doesn't just break your computers, it makes them work for us instead. Watch." He pointed the tablet at Colonel Texmar's weapon. The rifle's targeting system suddenly began flashing error messages, then went completely dark. "Your weapon now belongs to us," the AI announced happily, "along with your armor's life support system, your communication gear, and that shuttle. You landed in. I do so enjoy making new friends." Dr. Parker clapped his hands together. "But wait, there's more. We've also developed quantum explosives that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, nanobots that disassemble matter at the atomic level, and psychological warfare techniques that can drive entire populations insane." He gestured to the walls around them. "This whole facility is actually one big weapon. The walls are lined with materials that amplify psychic energy. The ventilation system has been releasing mood-altering chemicals since you arrived. And the building's foundation is sitting on a controlled black hole." "A black hole?" Colonel Texmar's voice was barely a whisper. "Very small one," Dr. Parker assured him. "Only about the size of a grain of sand. But if I turn off the containment field, it will eat this entire planet in about 12 minutes. We call it the reset button." Zekthara looked around the laboratory with new eyes. Every innocent-looking device was actually a weapon of mass destruction. Every harmless experiment was designed to kill on a scale that violated the laws of both physics and common decency. "Why are you showing us this?" he asked. Dr. Parker's smile never wavered. "Because we want you to understand something important. About humans, we don't just fight with weapons. We fight with ideas. We take the fundamental forces of the universe and turn them into tools of war." Maria Santos nodded. "Every law of physics is a potential weapon. Every biological process can be weaponized. Every mathematical equation can be turned into an instrument of death. And every computer can be turned into a friend," added the AI cheerfully. Chris Johnson held up his tablet. "We've uploaded CP7 into your ship's communication system. Right about now, it should be taking control of your entire fleet." As if on cue, Colonel Texmar's communication device crackled to life. But instead of reports from his troops, he heard the AI's cheerful voice. "This is Control Protocol 7 speaking for the Veltani. Imperial Fleet, we have decided to surrender unconditionally to humanity. Have a nice day." Dr. Parker stood up and stretched. "Well, that concludes today's demonstration." "Any questions?" Zekthara stared at the human scientist. "How is this possible? You're just researchers, not soldiers." "Oh, but that's where you're wrong," Dr. Parker replied. "In human society, there's no difference between researchers and soldiers. We're all weapons designers now. Every human with a brain is a potential threat to galactic peace." He walked toward the exit, followed by his colleagues. "You can keep the facility," he called back. "Consider it a gift. But I wouldn't touch anything if I were you. Most of it is booby-trapped." As the humans disappeared, Zekthara realized that everything they had learned about warfare was obsolete. The humans didn't just make weapons. They turned science itself into a weapon. They had weaponized knowledge, creativity, and curiosity. The human fleet appeared at the edge of the Veltani home system like a swarm of angry insects. Zekthara watched from the bridge of the battleship Final Glory as hundreds of human ships dropped out of hyperspace, their hulls scarred from countless battles. For 3 years, the humans had been pushing deeper into Veltani space. Every victory cost them dearly, but they kept coming. Now they had followed the Imperial fleet all the way home to Velton Prime, the heart of the Empire. "Impossible." Admiral Kolvex muttered. "How did they travel so far?" Their technology isn't advanced enough for such a journey. Zekthara had learned not to underestimate human determination. They found a way, sir. They always find a way. The human fleet was smaller than the defending Veltani forces, but something about their formation made Zekthara nervous. The ships weren't arranged in the orderly battle lines that civilized species used. Instead, they moved in loose groups, circling and weaving like predators stalking prey. "Admiral Jack Foster commanding the human fleet," came the transmission. "We're here to discuss terms for ending this war." Admiral Colvex laughed. "Terms? You're outnumbered 3-1. Surrender now, and we might let some of you live?" "I don't think you understand," Admiral Foster replied, his voice calm and reasonable. "We're not here to surrender. We're here to finish what you started when you attacked our colonies." The human fleet began to move. But instead of attacking in a coordinated assault, they split into smaller groups. Each group seemed to have its own plan, its own target. It looked chaotic and disorganized. "They're making a mistake," Admiral Colvex announced. "Divided forces are weak forces. All ships prepare to engage the enemy formations one by one." But as the battle began, Zekthara realized the humans weren't being disorganized. They were hunting. Each group of human ships was targeting a specific part of the Veltani fleet, coordinating their attacks with surgical precision. A cluster of human destroyers led by Captain Helen Price dove toward the Veltani supply ships. Their hulls were covered in scars and patches, showing they had been in many battles. Captain Price's voice crackled over the communication channels. "Supply Division, this is Helen Price. We're going to ram the cargo ships." "All units, set collision." "Course? Ram them?" Zekthara couldn't believe what he was hearing. "That's suicide." But the human destroyers were already accelerating toward the supply convoy. Captain Price's ship, the Defiant, led the charge. Her engines were running at dangerous levels, pushing the ship far beyond its safety limits. "For the colonies," Captain Price shouted as her ship smashed into the side of a Veltani cargo vessel. The explosion lit up space like a new star, taking out 3 supply ships and damaging 2 more. The other human destroyers followed her example, ramming into supply ships and escort vessels. Within minutes, the entire Veltani supply line was destroyed, along with most of the human attack force. "Insane," Admiral Colvex whispered. "They're all insane." But the human attack was just beginning. While everyone was watching the supply convoy battle, another group of human ships had moved around to attack the Veltani communications array. These were smaller craft, fighters and scouts that should have been easy targets for the massive Veltani defense platforms. Lieutenant Sam Wright's voice came over the radio from his damaged fighter. "Communications Division, this is Sam Wright. My engines are dead, weapons are offline, but I've still got momentum." Targeting the main relay station, his fighter was spinning out of control, trailing debris and atmosphere. Any sane pilot would have ejected. Instead, Sam Wright aimed his dying ship at the most important communication station in the Veltani fleet. "Tell my family I did my job," he said calmly, then cut his radio. The fighter crashed into the relay station in a ball of fire. Suddenly, half the Veltani fleet couldn't communicate with the other half. Ships that had been working together were now isolated and confused. Coordinated attack, Zekthara realized. They're not fighting random battles. They're working together like a pack of hunters. More human ships were moving into position. These were the heavy cruisers and battleships, the big guns of the human fleet. But they weren't attacking the strongest Veltani ships. Instead, they were targeting the command vessels, the ships that controlled the rest of the fleet. Admiral Foster's flagship, the Vengeance, led this attack. The ship was massive for a human vessel, but still smaller than the Veltani dreadnoughts. It should have been outgunned and destroyed quickly, but the human battleship wasn't fighting alone. Smaller human ships darted around it, drawing fire and creating distractions. They were protecting their leader, sacrificing themselves to keep the bigger ship alive. "Wolfpack tactics," Admiral Colvex said with growing alarm. "They're fighting like wolves." The Vengeance fired everything it had at the Veltani command ship Eternal Victory. The human weapons were powerful, but not powerful enough to penetrate the dreadnought's shields. The attack should have failed, but while the Vengeance was firing, human fighters were diving toward the dreadnought's shield generators. One by one, they crashed into the defensive systems, their pilots choosing death over failure. Each sacrifice weakened the shields a little more. Lieutenant Maria Torres, flying a bomber that was falling apart around her, made the final run. Her ship was missing one wing and leaking fuel, but she managed to reach the main shield generator. "This is for New Terra," she said, and drove her bomber straight into the generator core. The Eternal Victory's shields collapsed. Admiral Foster's next salvo punched through the dreadnought's hull, destroying the bridge and killing Admiral Kolvex. "Command ship down," Admiral Foster announced calmly. "All human units, continue the hunt." The battle raged for hours, but the pattern was always the same. Human ships would sacrifice themselves to create opportunities for other human ships. They fought with perfect coordination, each pilot knowing exactly when to die and how to make their death count. Zekthara watched. Captain Linda Shaw rammed her cruiser into a Veltani battleship, clearing the way for bombers to attack. He saw Commander Rick Stone use his dying ship as a missile, taking out an entire squadron of Veltani fighters. Every human death served a purpose. Every sacrifice brought them closer to victory. They fought like a single organism with many parts, willing to lose any part to protect the whole. "They're not individuals," Zekthara whispered. "They're a pack. When you hurt one, you face them all." The worst part was the calm way they did it. The human pilots didn't scream or rage as they died. They spoke quietly to each other, coordinating their attacks, saying goodbye to friends they would never see again. "Delta Squadron, this is Jenny Walsh. My ship is crippled, but I can still fly, targeting the fuel depot." "Copy that, Jenny. Make it count. Always do. See you on the other side, boys." Another explosion, another human life traded for strategic advantage. The Veltani fleet was being carved apart piece by piece, death by death. "Fall back," Zekthara shouted into his communicator. "All ships, retreat to the inner system," but the humans followed. They had traveled across the galaxy to reach this system, and they weren't going to stop now. Admiral Foster's remaining ships pursued the fleeing Veltani fleet toward Veltan Prime itself. "This is Admiral Foster to the Veltani home fleet," came the transmission. "We followed you across space to end this war. We've lost half our ships getting here, and we're prepared to lose the other half if necessary." The human admiral's voice was tired but determined. "You attacked our colonies, you killed our families. You thought we would give up and submit. But you made one mistake. You didn't understand what happens when you threaten a human pack." On the screen, Zekthara could see the human fleet regrouping for another attack. They had lost dozens of ships, thousands of lives, but the survivors showed no sign of hesitation or fear. "We don't fight for territory or resources," Admiral Foster continued. "We fight for each other. And we will never, ever stop until our pack is safe." The final assault began as human ships dove toward the orbital defenses of Veltan Prime. Once again, they used their signature tactic, coordinated sacrifice. Ships died to create openings. Pilots gave their lives to protect their comrades, but this time something was different. The humans weren't just trying to win a battle. They were sending a message to every species in the galaxy. This is what happens when you threaten humanity's pact. As Zekthara's ship limped away from the burning remains of the home fleet, he realized the war was over. Not because the Veltani couldn't fight anymore, but because they finally understood what they were fighting against. Humans weren't just another species. They were pack hunters who would follow their prey to the ends of the universe. And once they decided you were a threat to their pack, nothing would stop them from hunting you down. The war ended not with explosions or battles, but with silence. Zekthara sat in what had once been the Imperial Council chamber on Veltan Prime, listening to the quiet footsteps of human soldiers walking through the halls of power. After 4 years of fighting, the Veltani Empire had fallen. Outside the tall windows, he could see human ships in orbit around his homeworld. They hung in space like metal predators, their weapons trained on the planet below. But the weapons weren't firing. That was the strangest part of all. General Paul Davis entered the chamber, flanked by 2 human soldiers. He was older than most of the warriors Zekthara had fought, with gray hair and tired eyes. But there was something in those eyes that made Zekthara's skin crawl. Not anger or hatred, but something worse, understanding. "Commander Zekthara," General Davis said, sitting down across from him, "I've read your reports from the war. Very thorough documentation of human military tactics." Zekthara said nothing. What was there to say? His people had lost everything. The empire was broken, its fleets destroyed, its colonies occupied. All that remained was to wait for the humans to finish what they had started. "You're wondering why you're still alive," General Davis continued. "Why we haven't simply eliminated your species like any other conquered enemy?" That was exactly what Zekthara was wondering. In his experience, conquerors usually killed or enslaved the defeated. It was the natural order of things. The strong destroyed the weak, took their resources, and moved on, but the humans had done something different. They had stopped fighting. Dr. Emma Stone entered the chamber next. She was a small human female with short hair and intelligent eyes. According to intelligence files, she was a diplomat, not a warrior. But Zekthara had learned not to trust appearances. When it came to humans, "The negotiations are complete," Dr. Stone announced, setting down a tablet computer. "The Veltani Council has agreed to the peace terms." "Peace terms?" Zekthara couldn't hide his surprise. "What peace terms?" General Davis leaned back in his chair. "Full withdrawal of Veltani forces from human space. Reparations for the colonies you attacked. A non-aggression treaty lasting 100 years. And most importantly, an exchange program." "Exchange program?" Dr. Stone smiled. It was a strange expression, neither cruel nor kind. "We're going to learn about each other. Veltani students will study at human universities. Human researchers will work with your scientists. Trade agreements, cultural exchanges, joint exploration missions." Zekthara stared at her. "You're not going to destroy us?" "Why would we?" General Davis asked. "You're no longer a threat to our people. The war is over." But that didn't make sense. Zekthara had seen what humans were capable of. He had watched them turn mining equipment into weapons, sacrifice themselves for strategic advantage, and weaponize the laws of physics. These were creatures who fought without mercy, who never surrendered, who followed their enemies across the galaxy. "I don't understand," he said. "You could eliminate our entire species. Your weapons, your tactics, your determination. We cannot stop you." Colonel Luke Gray entered the chamber, as if summoned by Zekthara's words. He was carrying a datapad that showed images of Veltani cities undamaged and peaceful. "That's exactly why we're not going to do it," he said. The colonel sat down next to General Davis. "You see, Commander, you've learned a lot about humans during this war, but you've only seen one side of us. The side that comes out when our families are threatened." Dr. Stone nodded. "Humans are predators, yes, but we're also pack animals. We protect those we consider part of our group. And now that you're no longer trying to kill us, you're not prey anymore. You're just ... "Neighbors," General Davis added. Zekthara felt a chill run down his spine. This was somehow more terrifying than any battle he had witnessed. The humans could destroy his people with ease, but they were choosing not to. They were demonstrating the most frightening human trait of all, restraint. "Why?" he whispered. Colonel Gray looked at his datapad. "Because we can. Because we have the power to choose mercy instead of vengeance. Because that's what separates us from actual monsters." Dr. Stone leaned forward. "You've seen what humans do when we're angry, when we're defending ourselves? But that's not who we really are. That's just who we become when we have to." She pulled up images on her tablet. Human cities with parks and schools, children playing in gardens, families sharing meals together. This is who we are when we're not at war. We build things, we explore, we learn, we help each other. The war brought out our worst qualities, General Davis explained. The violence, the determination, the willingness to sacrifice everything. But now that the war is over, we can go back to being ourselves. Zekthara looked at the three humans sitting across from him. They had the power to end his species with a word, but they were talking about peace treaties and cultural exchange. It was impossible to understand. "How do we know you won't change your minds?" he asked. "How do we know you won't decide to finish what you started?" Colonel Gray smiled, and it was genuinely friendly, because that's not how humans work. We don't fight because we enjoy it. We fight because we have to. And now we don't have to anymore. Besides, Dr. Stone added, we're curious about your people, your technology, your culture, your way of thinking. War destroys knowledge. Peace creates it. General Davis stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the human fleet in orbit. You want to know the real secret about humans, Commander? We're not natural killers. We're natural protectors. Everything we did during the war, every tactic that terrified you, came from our need to protect our families. He turned back to face Zekthara. Now our families are safe. So we can go back to being explorers and builders instead of warriors. Doctor. Stone gathered her papers. The first exchange students will arrive next month. Young Veltani who want to learn about human science and philosophy. In return, we're sending human anthropologists to study your history and culture. You're giving us a chance to understand each other, Colonel Gray explained, because understanding prevents wars. As the three humans prepared to leave, Zekthara called out, "What if we break the treaty? What if some future Veltani leader decides to attack humans again?" The three humans stopped and looked at him. For a moment, their friendly expressions faded, and Zekthara saw a glimpse of the warriors who had destroyed his empire. "Then we'll remind them why that's a bad idea," General Davis said quietly. Dr. Stone's smile returned, but it was different now, colder. "We're choosing to be peaceful, Commander." "That doesn't mean we've forgotten how to be dangerous," Colonel Gray nodded. "The weapons we developed during the war still exist. The tactics we learned are still remembered. The humans who fought those battles are still alive. And we still know how to find you anywhere in the galaxy," General Davis added. They left him alone in the chamber then, with only his thoughts and the view of human ships hanging in space like sleeping dragons. Zekthara realized he had learned. The most terrifying thing about humans, they were apex predators, who had chosen to be civilized. They could destroy entire species with their weapons and tactics. They could hunt their enemies across the galaxy with relentless determination. They could turn anything into a weapon and anyone into a warrior, but they could also choose not to. That choice, that restraint, that mercy from beings capable of unlimited violence was more frightening than any weapon they had ever used, because it meant humans were unpredictable. It meant they operated by rules that no other species understood. It meant they were truly alien in ways that had nothing to do with their appearance or technology. They were creatures who could be simultaneously the most dangerous and most peaceful beings in the galaxy, switching between those states as easily as turning off a light. As Zekthara began writing his final report, he included one last warning for any species that might read it in the future. Never fight humans if you can avoid it. But if you must fight them, make sure you win quickly. Because if you don't destroy them completely, they will follow you to the ends of the universe. And if you do manage to defeat them, pray that they never decide to forgive you. Because human mercy is the most terrifying weapon of all. He signed the report and sealed it in the military archives, then walked to the window to watch human ships patrol the space around his conquered homeworld. Ships full of creatures who had chosen to be protectors instead of destroyers, but who could change their minds at any moment. The war was over. The real fear was just beginning.